G'day, you mob. Welcome to this episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today we are continuing on reading the book on our selection. This is going to be chapter 2 called Our First Harvest. Remember, you can go back and check out chapter 1 that was released previously. Also, before we get into it, don't forget there will be a bonus episode for members of the premium podcast so that we go through and break down all of the interesting vocabulary. And we'll also talk about how the English language used in this writing may differ from today and how we would speak English today, because this book was written about 126 years ago. So 1899, it was published by Steele Rudd. If you want the full transcript for this episode as well, be sure to sign up for the premium podcast. You can get this at aussieenglish.com.au/podcast. So yeah, go and check that out. There's over 1,300 different episodes on there. Loads of transcripts, loads of bonus episodes, the premium podcast player so you can read and listen at the same time. And you'll obviously get the full transcript for this episode, as well as that bonus one with the breakdown of the interesting vocab and how the English differs. So again, sign up to the premium podcast at aussieenglish.com.au/podcast. So without any further ado, let's get into today, chapter 2, Our First Harvest. If there is anything worse than burr cutting or breaking stones, it's putting corn in with a hoe. We had just finished. The girls were sowing the last of the grain when Fred Dwyer appeared on the scene. Dad stopped and talked with him while we, Dan, Dave and myself, sat on our hoe handles like kangaroos on their tails and killed flies. Terrible were the flies, particularly when you had sore legs or the blight. Dwyer was a big man with long brown arms and red bushy whiskers. "You must find it slow work with a hoe," he said. "Well, yes, pretty," replied Dad, just as if he wasn't quite sure. After a while, Dwyer walked over the cultivation and looked at it hard, then scraped a hole with the heel of his boot, spat, and said he didn't think the corn would ever come up. Dan slid off his perch at this, and Dave let the flies eat his leg nearly off without seeming to feel it, but Dad argued it out. All right, said Dwyer. "I hope it do." Then Dad went to speak on of places he knew where they preferred hoes to a plough for putting corn in with. Dwyer only laughed and shook his head. "Damn him," Dad muttered when he had gone. "What rot, won't come up." Dan, who was still thinking hard, at last straightened himself up and said he didn't think it was any use either. Then Dad lost his temper. "No use," he yelled. "You whelp, what do you know about it?" Dan answered quickly. "Only this, that it's nothing but tomfoolery, this hoe business." "How would you do it then?" Dad roared, and Dan hung his head and tried to button his buttonless shirt wristband while he thought. "With a plough," he answered. Something in Dad's throat prevented him saying what he wished, so he rushed at Dan with the hoe, but was too slow. Dan slept outside that night. No sooner was the grain sown than it rained. How it rained, for weeks, and in the midst of it all the corn came up, every grain, and proved Dwyer a bad prophet. Dad was in high spirits and promised each of us something, new boots all round. The corn continued to grow. So did our hopes, but a lot faster. Pulling the suckers and heeling it up with hoes was but child's play. We liked it. Our thoughts were all on the boots. 'Twas months since we had pulled on a pair. Every night in bed we decided 20 times over whether they would be lace-ups or bluchers, and Dave had a bottle of goanna oil ready to keep his soft with. Dad now talked of going up country, as Mother put it, to keep the wolf from the door, while the 4 acres of corn ripened. He went and returned on the day Tom and Bill were born, twins. Maybe his absence did keep the wolf from the door, but it didn't keep the dingoes from the fowl house. Once the corn ripened, it didn't take long to pull it, but Dad had to put on his considering cap when we came to the question of getting it in. To hump it in bags seemed inevitable, till Dwyer asked Dad to give him a hand to put up a milking yard. Then Dad's chance came and he seized it. Dwyer, in return for Dad's labour, carted in the corn and took it to the railway station when it was shelled. Yes, when it was shelled. We had to shell it with our hands, and what a time we had. For the first half hour, we didn't mind it at all, and shelled cob after cob as though we liked it. But the next day, talk about blisters, we couldn't close our hands for them. And our faces had to go without a wash for a fortnight. 15 bags we got off the 4 acres, and the storekeeper undertook to sell it. Corn was then at 12 shillings and 14 shillings per bushel, and Dad expected a big check. Every day for nearly 3 weeks he trudged over to the store, 5 miles, and I went with him. Each time the storekeeper would shake his head and say, "No word yet." Dad couldn't understand. At last word did come. The storekeeper was busy serving a customer when we went in, so he told Dad to hold on a bit. Dad felt pleased. So did I. The customer left. The storekeeper looked at Dad and twirled a piece of string around his first finger, then said, £12 for your corn cleared, Mr. Rudd. But of course, going to the desk, there's that account of yours which I have credited with the amount of the cheque. That brings it down now to just £3, as you will see by the account. Dad was speechless and looked sick. He went home and sat on a block and stared into the fire with his chin resting in his hands till Mother laid her hand upon his shoulder and asked him kindly what was the matter. Then he drew the storekeeper's bill from his pocket and handed it to her. And she too sat down and gazed into the fire. That was our first harvest.